This is the Roland System 100M from 1979. Now, the original system had 13 main modules, as well as a few limited edition prototype modules, and of those 13 original modules, we've got 11 of those present in this system. And so hopefully I should be able to give you a representative demonstration of what it's possible to do with this amazing instrument. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make 4 contrasting sounds, and at the end of each demonstration I'll explain how I set up that sound, which in turn should explain how the synth works. Let's go! Okay, a simple patch to start off with. The 182 sequencer module can run as 2 channels in sequence of up to 16 steps, or as 2 parallel sequences of up to 8 steps. I'm running it in parallel here, and the CV from channel 1 as well as the sequencer gate output are driving this bottom left cab. We've got 2 oscillators, 1 sawtooth and 1 square down the octave. We're using the filters, VCAs and envelopes too, of course, and in isolation that sounds like this. Channel 2 of the mixer then runs into this filter. Now, because a sequencer outputs control voltages, you can use it to sequence many things on a modular system rather than just an oscillator. So I'm basically sequencing a filter here using a 10 volt range. The higher the voltage from a step of the sequencer, the more the filter opens. So into that filter, I have white noise and also a square wave that's being modulated by an envelope. With lower voltages coming from the sequencer, you get the envelope square wave coming through the filter with differing levels of emphasis. And with higher voltages, the white noise gets through the filter to add a kind of snare sound. So here is that in isolation. I then used the multiple jacks on the system to split the sequencer gate signal out so that I could sequence some noise to create stereo hi-hats. Those run through the 172 phase shifter and audio delay respectively for added colour. Here those are in isolation. I'm also using the sequencer to clock the sample and hold in the 150 module, and using that to modulate the filter cutoff of the sawtooth wave used in the bassline and modulation intensity of the phase shifter on the hi-hats for added randomness. So that was bassline, kick, snare and hats all from one sequencer. What do you know? It can talk. So to create those Foreman vowel sounds, I took a single sawtooth from an oscillator and ran it through a resonant filter that is being contoured by this envelope. Now, the settings of that filter and the envelope have to be just right, otherwise it won't work. But once you've dialed it in, you can manipulate the attack time to move through yay, ay, and e sounds from the synth. But wait, there's more. you can use the sample and hold as an audio rate down sampler. Now, I've got to give a shout out to Ben from DivKid Video for showing me this, because I had no idea it was possible, but it's kind of obvious when someone points it out, and it's a really cool effect. So you take a self-oscillating filter that, on the System 100M in particular, will give you a frequency of up to 30 kHz. You then use that as the clock for the sample and hold. Next, you run your audio through the sample and hold as the external signal that it's sampling from, and now you've basically got the same setup that you would have with a digital sample. As you lower the filter frequency and therefore the clock frequency, the associated Nyquist frequency becomes lower and lower, and so you get all kinds of aliasing and artifacts in the audio signal exactly as you would in the digital domain. So this then gives a really gritty, throaty edge to the formant vowel sound I'd set up. Hours of fun. So, let's be honest, a little bit of a cheesy demo there, but I wanted to demonstrate that the System 100M can sound quite sweet if you want it to. It doesn't always have to be this gnarly experimental machine. So we're playing polyphonically, and we're doing that via the 184 4CV keyboard, which was the top-end keyboard you could get for the System 100M, and it's actually the digital scanning keyboard from the Jupiter 4. So you take 4 CVs, 4 gates, or a universal gate output if you want, and you set up each voice with 2 oscillators, filter, amp, envelopes. So that's exactly how it's set up on a polysynth. It's just that you have a global control for, say, the filter cutoff, but there is a filter for every voice. So obviously on this system you could set up completely different voices rather than have a uniform sound, if you so wanted. Okay, to finish up, we have a slightly more complex patch that sums down into 4 main parts, not including the drums, which actually came from my Roland TR-77, and there was a clap sample from a CR-8000 as well. So in channel 1 of the 131 output mixer, we have a simple bass line that's coming from the 182 sequencer. The 182 is being stepped through externally via its trigger input by a gate signal from my KeyStep Pro to the right. Channel 1 in the 182 sequencer drives 2 oscillators in the 112 module in the cab to the top left, and the second oscillator is phase synced to the first and is having its frequency modulated by the sample and hold in the 150 module that is clocked from the cab's gate input, which in turn takes its gate from the sequencer, so that's all running in time. Channel 2 of the 182 sequencer drives another oscillator in the 112 module in the bottom left cab. These sounds obviously use filters, amps and envelopes as you'd expect. So that total part sounds like this. Into channel 2 of the 131 output mixer we have probably the most complex part of the patch, so bear with me. We start with an oscillator from the 110 module in the cab to the top right. This oscillator is tracking the incoming CV of the cab it's in, which comes from my KeyStep Pro, and that CV is also running via the 165 module that allows Portamento to be introduced on the fly, which you hear me do in the latter part of the demonstration. Now that VCO runs into a filter in the 121 module in the bottom left with high resonance, and that runs into a VCA in the 130 module next to it. To explain the next bit, I'll work backwards. The VCA is modulated by this LFO in the bottom right. That LFO is having its frequency modulated by the non-inverted output of this 132 summing mixer. Into that mixer we have the output of this ring modulator, with the X and Y being the two VCOs in the 112 next to it. The second VCO is having its frequency modulated by this envelope to utilise the effect of the ring modulator. As well as bringing the ring modulator into the 132 summing mixer, I'm also using the normal voltage processor that is included in that mixer. You can combine audio signals, control signals and manual voltages in these summing mixers, so they're really interesting from a patching perspective. The total sound of that rather complicated setup is this. Apologies, we're still only halfway through this patch. Into channel 3 of the mixer we have this 110 module that runs into the audio delay, which is really a flanger, in the 172 module on the far right. The modulation intensity of that flanger is being modulated by the gate delay below it, and the gate driving that gate delay comes from the LFO in the 140 module 2 across from it. And that LFO is having its frequency modulated by the envelope above it, so that it varies over time. Now, playing around with the threshold, delay time and gate time settings of the gate delay whilst it modulates the flanger creates some unpredictable results which I thought were quite interesting. That sounds like this. And finally, we have this 110 running into the phase shifter, which also has its modulation intensity controlled via the LFO in the 140 module, just not via the gate delay like the flanger did. That sounds like this. And just finally, each sound has individual panning and level control in the output mixer. Whew! That was a lot of information, wasn't it? But I think it nicely demonstrates the kind of complex patches you can set up very quickly on the 100M to make unique sounds, which is the entire point. So there we go, that concludes my closer look at the System 100M. Certainly one of my most favourite synths ever, even more so now I've got to play with a bigger system like this. Hopefully it demonstrates that the patching possibilities are almost infinite on this synth, but above all it's able to yield musical results rather than uncontrollable noise, which I think is the best thing about it. Thank you to the owner of this system for the loan, and thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the next video.